Hello and welcome back to the Accelerating Inclusion training. In this module, we're going to dive into accountability practices. My name is Elain Alec. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a DEI practitioner for the 50-30 Challenge project, together with the Women's Economic Council. I am born and raised in Sweden and moved over to Turtle Island almost 5 years ago. I am recording this session from the stolen lands of the Seal people in a small town called Naramata. And with that, I wanted to recognize this land that I live, work, and learn on, and extend my respect and appreciation for its original stewards. I moved here about 1.5 years ago, and I'm continuously learning about the true history of this land and how to walk gently on it, just as the Siouxs people have done since time immemorial. I am an immigrant, and I'm an uninvited settler on this land. And with that, I also acknowledge my responsibility to uphold Indigenous sovereignty and the principles of respect, reciprocity, and reconciliation in the work that I do. Let's look at what we're looking to learn today. So first, we're gonna try and understand what accountability is, and then look at different frameworks to practice it. One of those frameworks is a 5-step model called Co-op Circle of Accountability. And we're going to go through each of those steps to learn how to apologize, to repair trust, and take accountability for an action that has been done. After that, I'll hand over to Michelle, who will guide us through accountability from a Cultivating Safe Spaces framework. So that includes learning the basic elements of cultivating safe spaces, which supports safety, connection, and belonging in various contexts, and also understanding the necessary conditions for cultivating safe spaces and protocols to promote well-being, inclusion, validation, and freedom. But let's start by talking about what accountability is and why it is important. Sometimes we get called out or get called into a conversation. It could be for something that we said in a meeting, or maybe something more on an organizational level, like a structure or process that is exclusionary to some folks. And when we're being called in and called out, that can be difficult, and sometimes it results in defense mechanisms. But by practicing accountability, it will help us to realize that these call-outs are actually invitations to learn. Sometimes someone believes in our ability to do better. So instead of defending ourselves, we should thank them for their feedback. And as a leader, by modeling gratitude for constructive feedback and by welcoming honesty without any form of retaliation, you can help nurture a culture of psychological safety. And that will help build an environment where equity deserving groups and those with limited access to power feel safe enough to share valuable feedback. And here is one of the many definitions of accountability that I'm going to read to you. Accountability is the responsibility of an individual or organization to answer for its activities. It involves accepting the consequences, both positive and negative, of one's actions. This principle ensures transparency and honesty in various processes and decisions. It is a cornerstone of trust in both personal and professional relationships. So let's start by looking at this 5-step accountability model. It is adapted from Mia Menge's 4 parts to accountability. And here we have added the step of shared learning. This model is meant to provide a framework that can guide you and your team in the journey towards true accountability. And each step of this practice really serves as an opportunity to demonstrate our values and our solidarity to the people that we work or interact with. Again, this could be both in a professional setting or in a personal setting. And remember that accountability is an opportunity for course correcting, transforming, and building a culture where all of us feel safe and valued. And for co-ops in particular, practicing accountability goes hand in hand with cooperative values and principles such as self-responsibility, openness, and concern for community. So let's go through this model step by step. First, self-reflect to understand that harm has been done. Listen to understand, not to respond. Here it's important to manage your defense reactions to minimize the risk of causing even more harm. Engage in reflection and self-education. It's important to not ask whoever has been harmed for the additional emotional labor of explaining or educating you on the topic. In today's environment, there are lots of good resources out there. And so the first step here in self-reflection is to take that on the labor yourself to search for good resources and learn on the subject. It's also important to remember here that intention doesn't equal impact. We are accountable for harm even if it wasn't intended. And that means that we have to take responsibility for any impact that our actions or our words had, even if it was well intended. And then take accountability as an organization. So oftentimes harmful behavior isn't simply due to the shortcomings of one person in an organization, but it's related to or maybe even enabled by a culture or a system in there. So on an organizational level, in this step, it can be helpful to reflect on what in our organizational culture, systems, or structures may leverage harmful behavior. The next step in this model is apologize genuinely. And remember, it is okay to ask for time to reflect first. Sometimes that is what is needed in order to give a genuine apology, a genuine and informed apology. Because that apology should include all of these things. It should demonstrate that impact is understood. If you minimize or dismiss impact, it may actually cause even more harm. And the apology should be clear and sincere and without any dilution such as but or if. So instead of saying, I am sorry that you feel this way, or I'm sorry that you feel this way, say, I am sorry for hurting you. Decenter yourself and your own feelings. It's really important to focus on how the people or the person who were harmed were affected, not your own feelings. So in other words, your apology shouldn't sound like, I feel so horrible for what I did. I haven't even been able to sleep last night. It's not your feelings that should be in focus right here. And then the last but very important piece of accountability-based apology is to communicate specific actions that you will take to do better in the future. And then follow through on these actions through the steps that are coming next in this model. As an organization, you can engage in this step by asking yourself, does the degree and type of harm prompt an officially stated apology by leadership? And what procedures do we have in place for apologizing internally and externally? Then step 3 is about repairing trust. And repair includes making amends and rebuilding trust. Amends needed to repair that trust will differ depending on the degree of harm and the type of harm. And it should be based on the needs of the people who were harmed. So with that, we need to understand the desires and the needs of the person or the group that experienced the harm. And it's important to remember here that repair isn't a linear path. It doesn't follow like a straight line. It does require consistency and it can take a long time. And on an organizational level, you can ask yourself, how will the organization center the needs and desires of the group that were harmed? Does the harmed groups feel safe to engage in dialogue to express their needs and resolution? If not, what are ways for us to make them feel safer? Step 4, change behavior. So this starts with communicating a plan of action beyond the present moment and then following through on that plan of actions. And transforming behavior is hard work. So have self-compassion and get support for yourself in the process. And sometimes, so this part of accountability, with changing behaviors, the roots may go deep and bring up past trauma that requires some level of healing. Therefore, it's important that this is something that we practice. On an organizational level, this step, you can ask yourself, what specific changes to organizational behavior, culture, norms, processes, etc., are needed to rebuild trust and mitigate future harm? How will we sustain this change and hold ourselves accountable? Step 5, share the learnings. Here we want you to move away from fault finding to a more solution-focused approach. So instead of asking the question, who is wrong, ask what is wrong and how can we do all better? How can all of us do better? And this goes back to transparency and vulnerability. Talk about mistakes instead of hiding them. Because if you can share your learnings with others, that might actually help prevent future harm caused by somebody else. And an important note here is to only share learnings if it is okay to do so, and if it won't risk the safety or well-being of the people who were harmed. For example, you may decide to share what was learned without giving any situational context or details to that specific situation. And again, on an organizational level, you can engage in reflection by asking yourself, what in our organization's culture or structure discourages or encourages people to be honest about their mistakes? How can we move from blame to accountability? Okay, so now when we have gone through all steps in this model and talked about the importance of practicing accountability, I thought it would be a good opportunity to take a pause and practice using this model. So for this activity, I want you to think of a situation where you messed up in a way that may have caused harm on somebody. And this could be at work or in your personal life. And try not to shy away from this. Remember that we all make mistakes, and the best thing that we can do is to take accountability for them and do better in the future. So see this as an opportunity to grow from your mistake. As we covered in the last module, failure and growth often comes hand in hand. So ask yourself, what is the lesson learned here? So think of a specific situation and use this accountability model. Go through each step, reflecting on ways to resolve and repair the situation that you are thinking of. The idea with this exercise is to practice ways like how to best take accountability for and deal with the situation where we messed up, because we won't always get it right all the time. So with that, please grab a pen and paper or however you want to take notes, and I will leave it to you to go through this exercise. And afterwards, my colleague Michelle will lead us all through accountability from a Cultivating Safe Spaces framework.
I am grateful to be able to share this beautiful framework with you. I will be sharing some of the elements of the Cultivating Safe Spaces framework and teachings from Elain Alec and her company Naxmist, which means many coming together as one in the Sielg language. As I pass on these teachings, I hope that ways that cultivating safe spaces might weave into your context come to the surface, whether it's in work, community, or your personal life. Elain Alec describes this framework as helping people along their path of being human, particularly through changing systems and structures, how we make decisions together, and communicate with each other, how we create and share spaces of safety, connection, and belonging. Before moving into the elements of the Cultivating Safe Spaces framework, I will share a bit about how I came to cultivating safe spaces and what it means to me. My name is Michelle Satsumi. I am a city kid of parents who grew up in the country. My mother is Carol Lindell from Plains Cree Territory in Saskatchewan, whose parents were grain farmers and whose ancestors were Huguenots from France who fled to England, as well as from Norway and Sweden. My late father is Shin Satsumi, who was born in Stalo Territory, where his parents grew strawberries, and then were uprooted and separated during the internment and incarceration of Japanese Canadians in World War II. He eventually landed in Syilx Territory in Coldstream. I was born and raised in Niitsitapi Territory, what is dominantly known as Calgary, which is where my parents met, as they had both moved there to further their education. I am currently living, growing food, and working in Shekwekmakulu, close to the village of Chase, with my daughter, partner, and his mother, along with a few friends who farm close by. The Cultivating Safe Spaces framework arrived at a point in my life when I was navigating a toxic workplace due to unchecked power dynamics, and the pathway that this framework provides to doing and being better felt like a breath of fresh air. Cultivating safe spaces was a clear antidote to what I was experiencing and offered hope for a different way. At its root, cultivating safe spaces has provided me with a deeper understanding of myself, which helps me to create a safer space where folks can feel a sense of connection and belonging and be in decision-making from that place. I find myself being more mindful about self and collective care and practicing deep listening and protecting the time needed for care and deep listening, slowing down, naming what's happening, and weaving together solo time with group time. So I'll start in this framework with the 4 necessary conditions for cultivating safe spaces. At the core, the most essential, necessary condition is understanding self. Because if we are not a safe space, we cannot cultivate safe spaces for others. To be a safe space, I need to know and recognize what it is that triggers me, what irritates me, and how I tend to that and care for these triggers. This is an embodied practice, noticing what's coming up, paying attention to the signals and signs that our body offers us. Things like a knot in the stomach, tightness in the chest, body temperature rising or going very cold. Understanding self connects with things like, am I rested enough to facilitate this conversation? Have I had enough food? Do I have water with me? Do I have someone to debrief with? In terms of understanding self with a group, I think a key piece to this is an invitation to introduce ourselves by answering the questions, who am I, or who do I belong to, and what is on my heart? And this is something that Elain Alec invites when there is space for an introduction round, a fulsome introduction round. The next necessary condition for cultivating safe spaces is love-based practice, also known as trust-based practice. Some of our spaces get all uncomfortable when they hear the word love. So love and trust and faith are all part of this necessary condition. And in this necessary condition, it is about the ways that we are building trust and faith in our processes and each other. This is about being able to be in tension, finding ways to stay in relationship, finding ways to express needs or boundaries, offer and receive feedback. At the root of this is care for self and others, collective care. Patience as a necessary condition is slowing down, making space for reflection, and holding gentleness when mistakes are made, balls are dropped. I was in a session a couple of weeks ago where folks recognized the need to take themselves less seriously, and I celebrated that. That really felt like a noticing and an antidote to the dominant cultural characteristic of perfectionism. So patience is about that gentleness with ourselves and others when mistakes are made. Discipline is all about listening and listening with discipline. Can we listen deeply without judgment about right or wrong, good or bad? Can we listen without thinking of how we will respond, our to-do lists? Can we listen with focus and openness? Together, these necessary conditions allow for people to challenge and change the systems and solve problems in their own way. Next, we'll explore the 4 perspectives, and we need all of these perspectives. So this is an invitation to look at your teams and groups and do a bit of a self-assessment. Are all of these perspectives represented? If not, which ones are missing? And how do we welcome in someone with that perspective? Elain Alec shared how she is reflecting regularly about who is on her team and ensuring that there are folks from each of these perspectives. So traditional perspectives are the storytellers, knowledge keepers, and language speakers. They share lived experience as a way to contribute to decision making. These folks often hold the corporate or organizational memory and like to share this knowledge and share this through mentoring the next generation. Relationship perspectives enjoy building relationships and forming connections and don't care how long a process takes. They don't want to leave anyone out, and they will spend a lot of time getting to know each other. These folks are often the ones who will be preparing food and drinks for the group and nourishing the group in that way. They tend to want to be better at what they do so that they can better serve others. Innovation perspectives are system thinkers and out-of-the-box thinkers who need a lot of time to think and process. They need quiet time and breaks, as well as they have lots of questions to ask. These folks are often quiet in the moment and get passed over or are left out. They often are thinking of what they could have contributed after the conversation is over. Consider sharing agendas ahead of time and offer ways for the innovation folks to contribute after a session or a meeting so that their ideas can be included. Action perspectives like to get things done. They don't like spending a lot of time talking, and they want to make sure that we are being productive and efficient. Action people are often leaders. Supporting action perspectives might look like sharing the outline or agenda in advance for different reasons than the innovation folks. For action people, they like to see the agenda in advance so they know what the plan is, how much time is dedicated to each portion, and what the outcomes might be that they can expect or what they can expect to experience. The 4 protocols to create safety, connection, and belonging are antidotes to the colonial approach to meetings and gatherings and doing things. Each perspective needs different things, and each protocol serves each of the perspectives, but also all of the perspectives in their own way and as a whole. So that it's helpful to consider these protocols as you're forming agendas, designing events, engaging in team building experiences. So the first protocol is to promote well-being. And this is supported by providing the time and space to share stories and knowledge, as well as tending to body, mind, and spirit. Protocols for well-being might look at taking care of each other and practicing self-care, understanding that responsibility doesn't fall on one person, but the community or group as a whole. A key piece here is that personal information that individuals share is not to be shared by someone other than that individual. Promoting inclusion means checking if anyone is missing and ensuring that every person in the circle will be given an opportunity to speak. This protocol asks that the person speaking is not interrupted, the listeners do not debate, disagree, or put down anyone's views. We are asked to listen and honor each other even if we don't agree with it, that we do our best to honor everyone's purpose. Promoting freedom means that people know they have a choice, including doing what is needed to be comfortable. For example, if sitting for long periods of time is uncomfortable, that it's okay to stretch, stand next to the chair, move the body, being able to eat during the conversation and meeting is sometimes necessary, and just being transparent about these things being okay. These protocols are in place to help people make decisions and build trust and respect. And the root of that is being comfortable physically. They are not meant to make people feel uncomfortable or feel shame for not being able to participate in a way that is comfortable for everyone else. Promoting validation is rooted in active listening and witnessing. This one can be the most challenging because it requires us to practice discipline and patience with each other. This protocol asks that we do our best to listen to everything being said without thinking about what you want to say or letting the mind wander outside the room. It also asks that you do your best to stay open-minded without judging another's perspective and experience as right or wrong. This next slide offers a comparison of colonial practices and decolonial practices or ways of being. Colonial systems have taught us to make decisions from fear and control. Indigenous learning teaches us to make decisions from trust, faith, and love. I won't say too much about these, however, invite you to notice what comes up as I describe the shifts and transformations from one to the other. Notice where there is tightness or tension, changes in temperature, shifts in breathing, what you might be curious about. Cultivating Safe Spaces offers a framework to consider how you might tend to the 4 necessary conditions, engage all 4 perspectives, and enact the 4 protocols so that there can be a transformation within self, family, workspaces, and community. These are transformations from fear-based to love-based ways of being, from sickness or death to well-being, from exclusion to inclusion, from oppression to freedom, from shame to validation. Cultivating Safe Spaces framework, I'm going to circle back and revisit the necessary conditions and offer some reflections for each of the 4 necessary conditions. So this is an invitation to pause, take a moment to consider these reflection questions, and it might be over a series of moments, questions that you come back to at different times. So there are several questions to further understanding self. Some of them I shared earlier that are used in introduction rounds. Who am I? Where do I come from? What is on my heart? There's a question about love-based or trust-based practice and what that looks like for you. There are some considerations around patience and how you practice patience, what helps to build patience, and looking at what are some of the things that might trigger you. Elain Alec has also shared a beautiful meditation on discipline, and there are some reflection questions to help explore what type of listener you are. With that, I wish you well on your reflections, and thank you for sharing your time with me.